A very common off-road motorcycle riding misconception that I myself was guilty of for far too long is this idea that you can't use your front brake on loose surfaces like gravel, dirt, mud, any of that stuff. I think this is a pretty common fear, and I wonder if it comes from riding bikes as a kid. We all know a friend who grabbed too much front brake and went over the handlebars on a bicycle, but I have really good news for you. Motorcycles are actually quite a bit heavier than bicycles, so this is a lot less likely. People fear losing traction or going over the bars when using their front brake on a loose surface, which completely ignores the wide area in between those two extremes where you're just using the front brake safely and effectively. If you examine those two fears at the same time, they're actually kind of a contradiction. How can the front tire simultaneously have so much traction that it locks up and throws you forward, while also having so little traction that the front tire immediately slides out from underneath you the moment you apply any pressure to the brake lever? I would go as far as saying that maximizing front brake usage is one of the most important skills for riding off-road safely and successfully. If you don't have this down, it will severely limit your confidence and your skill ceiling as a rider. It's one of the first things they teach in off-road riding classes. In fact, they teach it on the first day at the XT ADV training for a reason. If you can't stop, you can't ride. So why is it wrong? Why are people so confused? Why do people fear using their front brake off-road? I'm sure you all heard in your MSF class or whatever beginning motorcycle riding class you took that your front brake is 70% of your stopping power. Well, when you're going downhill on the dirt, it's more like 80 or 90% because your rear wheel is mostly just going to lock up and drag if you use it too aggressively. So avoiding your front brake means you have like 10 or 20% stopping power when you need it most, namely when you're going faster than you want to downhill and there's an obstacle or a cliff approaching very quickly. I think this is a common fear because the MSF classes and other street riding classes teach beginners to use 4 fingers on the brake lever. They do this because beginners lack hand strength and most modern street bikes have front ABS. So in most situations where traction is abundant, that is on the pavement, it's better to apply too much pressure than too little. Off-road riding, however, requires a lot more finesse, which is why most experienced off-road riders use 1 or 2 fingers on the brake and clutch lever. This is a skill you have to purposefully practice to develop both the feeling and the finger strength to do so all day. Once you spend some time practicing and you find the edge of traction on your specific bike, you'll get a lot better at working very close to the point of traction loss and therefore maximizing your braking power and shortening your stopping distance. How do you get better at this skill? Again, I'm not a riding instructor. I'm not an expert on riding, but these are the things that I've done to get better that have worked for me, and my skills have improved a lot over the last few years. So here's some tips that I've sort of figured out and picked up both on my own experience and from all the classes I've taken. First of all, you got to start with riding with 2 fingers on the brake lever. I now do this instinctually and all the time, whether I'm on the street or not, but you need to at least start trying to consciously do it when you're riding off-road. Get used to this being your default hand position and start building strength and endurance in these 2 fingers because they will get tired at first if you're not used to only using them. Then, once you've kind of started practicing that, the next time you're on a flat gravel or dirt road, start by just practicing using only your front brake to stop. I'm not saying panic stop, I'm just saying when you come to a stop, give yourself a little extra room and just use that front brake to come to a stop. We're just trying to get comfortable with using the front brake off-road at first. This will build your confidence because you have a lot more stopping power with that front brake than you think. Body position here is key. If you're feeling like when you pull the front brake you're getting thrown forward a lot, you're sitting too far forward. If you know you're gonna brake or you see a place where you have to stop coming up, you should be training your body to get back on the bike, either physically move or at least lean your torso back before you apply that brake so you can still kind of stay in that neutral body position. If you're already forward and you pull the brake in, it's going to push you way too far forward and to the point of being uncomfortable. But if you just get used to leaning back or moving back before you apply the brakes, then you will have a much better time. This is a side note, but successful off-road riding is an active activity. This is not something I understood when I first started. You'll have to get used to moving your body around to move past the very basic beginner skill level. So if that's something that you want to do, get it into your head right now that riding a motorcycle off-road is an active activity that requires you to move your body and shift your weight around a lot. So once you've kind of got the basics of stopping, you've built some confidence using only your front brake, and you're getting used to moving backward before you do it, you're gonna start panic braking or at least trying to stop shorter with your front brake. Don't stop like as short as possible immediately, but just as you come to stops here and there, or just as you practice over and over, come to a stop shorter and shorter and shorter to the point where you're really feeling the edge of that traction. You wanna try to find the point right before or close to when your front tire starts to lose traction. If you have front ABS, leave it on. That'll give you a safety margin so you don't have to worry about panicking and going over the bars or sliding out the front because the ABS will kick in. So try to find the edge of the front ABS. On my bikes with off-road ABS, I just leave the front on all the time. It's generally plenty for what I need, and it's nice to have that margin for error. If your bike doesn't have off-road ABS, you may want to practice coming to the edge of the ABS, but if it's kicking in too aggressively and you can't slow down enough, you may want to turn it off and then practice again. Once you're confident in your traction and braking power and feel like you have a sense for where the front starts to lock up and you can react instinctively by letting off the front brake at that point to prevent a slide, move to a gentle downhill, do the same thing. Stop over a long distance and slowly shorten the distance that you stop with just the front brake, just to get a feel for what that feels like, moving your body, finding the edge of traction. Once you've developed a feel for your front brake and the edge of traction on an easy hill, it's time to start moving to a steeper one. Give yourself some margin for error. We're not going to go to the most aggressive hill on the edge of a cliff here. There's going to be something where there's a steep section of a less steep hill, or there's a very good run out at the bottom. We're not jumping right into the deep end here, but next time you're on a steep downhill, practice slowing down aggressively with your front and see if the skills you've developed using your two fingers, moving your body and finding the edge of traction start to apply better. And then just keep practicing this every time you're on a downhill until you're confident you can apply the front brake with finesse and you're doing it instinctively without having to think about using two fingers, how much pressure, or letting off if the front tire gets too much traction. The problem with off-road riding is there is variability in traction and it's hard to predict. So you really have to get used to riding the edge and adjusting as necessary as you're riding. There's no 100% true hard and fast amount of pressure. You just have to know your own bike and the edge of that traction. And once you've got that down, when you can kind of ride that edge and you can adjust as necessary instinctively, congratulations. You can now stop your motorcycle 10,000 times more effectively. I want to stress here that a lot of people give these tips and they're trying to say, if you don't do it at a master level, then you suck. It's not that hard and fast. The point is just to get better and ride to your ability, your confidence. You don't need to be a master at it if you never take on the most difficult off-road, but you should be as good as possible or as good as you're confident being just in case something happens. We all blow a corner now and then and have to stop quickly, more quickly than we had anticipated. This is a skill that can save your life and it will improve your off-road riding. Just get as good as you're comfortable with. You don't have to do it overnight, but just practice every time you go out. You'll get better and become more confident. That front brake is so important and so useful, you should not be avoiding it. A few notes, ABS, first of all, front ABS on modern dual sport and adventure bikes is pretty good. Like I said, I leave it on most of the time. The rear ABS is up to you. There are advantages to being able to lock up the rear on purpose, but if you're not at the point of steering with the rear of the bike, sliding around corners and stuff on purpose, then it can be better to leave your off-road ABS on. You should turn your street ABS off regardless, particularly to the rear wheel, because it'll prevent you from even being able to slow down in a lot of cases. Play with it on an easy slope, get a feel for where it is and decide on your own bike what it's like. My old Africa Twin, ABS all the way off. That was a 2016, didn't have off-road ABS and it sucked. Every bike I own now, my Ibex 450, that 790, and the new 390 Enduro, leave ABS on. Off-road ABS, because it has an off-road specific ABS. The point is to figure out how to maximize your braking power while riding the edge of where your ABS kicks in, if it's on. So play with it, find the edge, start slow, flirt with the edge, but you don't need to be riding the edge all the time. Most off-road riding is casual, and as long as you're not riding at an excessive speed, then you don't need to panic brake all the time, but it is nice to know that you can. So when should you avoid using the front brake? Because no rule is 100% true, right? Well, in particular, if you're riding in the sand, you should stay off the front brake. That is the one time when I would say no front brake for you, because if you pull that front brake in on the sand, your front tire immediately dives because the suspension compresses, you're no longer on top of the sand, you're down in it, and it's really easy for that front tire to dig in and you to go down. So off-road on the sand, I generally recommend just letting off the throttle if you want to slow down, because the friction of the sand will slow you down in most cases, but if you need to stop quickly, rear brake is your friend. Just know there are exceptions to every rule, but most of the time I use my front brake. The most important thing here is to be mindful and focus on practicing every time you go out. You don't need to master this right away, but it's important to keep working on it. Your off-road riding confidence will skyrocket when you can stop worrying about careening out of control down a hill or over a cliff because you don't know how to stop. Next time you leave the pavement, focus on getting comfortable with your front brake on loose surfaces. You'll be astounded how quickly you get a feel for it. If you're curious about other ADV myths, such as do you need an ADV helmet or should you stand up all the time while riding off-road, well, check out the other ADV myth-busting videos in this playlist. And please consider subscribing if you want more dual sport and adventure riding hints, tips, reviews, and other content. That's what I do, and it'd be great to see you again. Also, please don't forget to use those affiliate links to Rocky Mountain ATV, Amazon, Revzilla, Moto Camp Nerd, Moscow Moto, and more. There's a full list in the description of this video and in a pinned comment. Every time you click one of those links, I get a small commission. It costs you nothing extra, and you get to support the content without spending any money. It's a win-win in my book, so thank you to all of those of you who continue to do that. That's what keeps this channel rolling. I appreciate you. Thank you for watching, and please do not forget to be excellent to each other. Thank you.
Excellent!